talking to Margo about it, and it's a very good time to look ahead. We're real thin right now with volume until the new year. Makes the market vulnerable to raids, but what a great person to talk about what might be in front of us in 2026. Margo Amala does planetary work, astrological, astronomic, what do people call astro? A lot
Yeah.
of astro stuff. So, Margo, great to be with you. 2025 was a good year for me. Hope it was good for you.
Indeed. Yeah. Thanks for having me. Yeah, 2025 it was a buy the dip kind of year.
Yeah, and we met. So there you go.
It was a
That's
good
a
year.
good thing that happened. We've helped each other, and it's always good to have allies in this world, and you're a great one. So why don't we talk about what you're seeing coming up? And you said, well, we do have the solstice this Friday. There's so much stuff going on. It's going to be the release of the Epstein files. It's
Mm.
the solstice. We have the BOJ. All this stuff happening right around the change of season. So, what are you seeing?
Yeah, it's true. Here, let me share my screen and I'll share a few charts.
Okay.
And okay, so let's see. Hold on. Move these guys, this guy. Okay, so here, this is the winter solstice. This is an astrology chart. So listeners may or may not be familiar with it, but basically what the winter solstice is it's when the sun reaches minimum declination. The sun kind of just hits maximum and minimum declination with both solstices, winter and summer. And so it's a bit of a geometrical event, if you will, from an astronomy perspective. And a lot of there are assets that move with the solstices. And then there are some assets that actually move, and by move I mean they experience weekly pivots, so they change direction around the equinoxes also. And it
Yeah,
was a technique that Gann used. Um, and then
very
there's
good.
something else we can do, which is that we can also just look at the astrology chart of the event, and we can get a feel for what energies are going to be at play. And so this is kind of how I start off, and then I jump off from there into charts. And the
Okay.
one thing that really stood out to me about this winter solstice is that it is the sun. The sun on the winter solstice is always at 0 degrees Capricorn, and it's diametrically opposed, 180 degrees opposite an asteroid called Hygeia, which is the asteroid of health and wellness. And so when I saw that, I thought, well, I should probably take a look at the XLV chart, right? And what's very fascinating is, so we've got two events combined together. We've got the solstice, and then we've got the sun opposite Hygeia. And if we were to zoom out, because this is a geocentric chart from looking at the planets from the Earth's perspective. I also look at a lot of heliocentric charts, which are looking out at the planets from the sun's perspective. And so the sun and the Earth are always 180 degrees diametrically opposed, which means that while the sun is opposite Hygeia, Earth is conjunct Hygeia. And so I applied those events on to the XLV chart, which was very
Healthcare.
interesting. Um, and what I find is that the XLV chart definitely has a correlation to weekly trend changes associated with the winter solstice. And then when you add in the Hygeia event, that is also has a pretty strong correlation to weekly trend changes. Not every single event, but if you do give it a 1 week orb or a
Yeah,
time band, right?
yeah,
Then
yeah.
we get that same thing. So that is one chart that I've definitely got my mind eye on. I'm watching this one as we move into the solstice.
You made a great point. I think a lot of people get impatient with these dates because they don't give it a window, Margo.
Yeah,
You have to give things that are so macro
yeah,
a time window. I mean, at least a few days on either side of the event to me is a minimum. A week doesn't sound like a long time when you're talking about what could be an important turn. So, are you saying that this could be setting up? Because I know people have been piling into healthcare as tech has been under pressure.
Yeah.
Are they going to be wrong-footed into the solstice? Is that what you're projecting?
Well, it's hard. Right now, we've got what I would consider healthy weekly consolidation. Right, we've just come
Okay.
down and tapped the 8 EMA.
Yeah.
We're holding above the 236, so it's hard to feel bearish on this chart at the moment.
Okay.
But if price is moving firmly up into this event, we may either see continued consolidation here for a few weeks, right? Because that's the rule of the pivots. If we take a look and we see, so this is the event we're about to approach. If we go back and take a look at the last winter solstice, it's this one here. It's the sun at minimum declination. And you can see that we were just 1 week off of the low here, and then we kind of went sideways before we made a turn,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And this is a pattern that persists if we look at the, oops, we've got some, I see. There we go. My drawing too many lines here. Yeah, if we go back and take a look at prior events, and we can look at the summer solstices too, and you can see here we had just a little buy the dip opportunity here before continuation. So I do tend to think that we're going to see a weekly pivot. The question is, will it be a massive downturn, or will it just lead to further weekly consolidation? So
Okay.
that's definitely something I've got that I'm watching.
You know what is also interesting is that people, because I don't think anything has been passed by Congress
Yeah,
to extend the subsidies of Obamacare, and and so
yeah,
health, okay, health, and a
yep.
lot of people are going to see their premiums really rise dramatically. Um, that,
That's a really good point.
right? So, that ties in with what you're seeing in healthcare. Maybe that's not so bullish healthcare if people can't get covered. Um,
That's a really good point. And with Hygieia, because Hygieia is at 0 degrees Cancer, and Cancer's the sign of, well, caring for others. So
okay.
that is pretty interesting. And with this, the sun opposed to that is an interesting take on that. I really great,
Yeah,
great thought, Dale.
good collaboration. Well, anyway,
Very as usual.
call me a perma bear. I'm going to be looking for a top in healthcare. They put my attention to. Okay, so healthcare, and that's I know people have been piling into it because they felt it was undervalued, but we've had a pretty good rally in
We
healthcare.
we have, yeah. The thing that I would say, if I was talking about what do I anticipate for 2026, is that I think that 2025 has been really clearly it's been an up year, a buy the dip kind of year. I think that 2026 is going to be a bit more of a trader's year. I use different planetary cycles, and those different cycles give me a bearing, if you will, or a read for the general direction of the market. And one of the primary cycles that I use is the 8-year cycle. And I use it with quite a degree of accuracy. Now, that doesn't mean that we're going to repeat the 8-year cycle tick for tick. This is 2018 would be the 8-year cycle from 2026, right?
Okay.
But if you take a look at the structure of what happened in 2018, this was not the kind of year where you could just buy and wait and it would go up, right? You could buy strategically at effectively timed moments, and you could make some great money. But this is kind of the general structure that I'm expecting to see. Now, the question is, will we come down hard early in the year like we did in 2018? And that's yet to be seen. We do have a lot of very strong planetary events taking place in January. These.
Would you mind just going back to that chart?
Oh, yep.
Because I have
Yep.
a thought, because I know 2018, near the end of the year, if you show it, we were down hard into the end of the year.
We
And
were.
and
Yeah.
wait, it looks like there is a possibility of that happening here. A lot of things like NVIDIA breaking down, a lot of things are semiconductors look heavy,
There it is.
MAGA looks heavy. So I was thinking that maybe we're going to have the same kind of finish. I don't know when that low came in, but I know that um, it was the beginning of the Powell regime, and he had tightened, and the market sold off. That's that big red candle. And then he got called out by Bernanke and Yellen, and they had a little conference saying "Kumbaya," and he reversed course, and therefore there's the rally. So
Yeah.
that's what happened. I think that was one of Kramer's rants. You don't know what you're doing. You have no idea what, and it was new. He was new. So maybe we're going to flush into where was that green candle, the low? Where did that low come in? Do you have a date?
Are you talking here in February of 2018
No, I'm
at the
talking about
end?
the end of the year. Yeah, where was
Yeah,
it?
yeah. So at the end of December,
Christmas.
it was, yeah, this was the Christmas crash
Okay, yeah,
from 2018. And, this aligns with the second half of 2018
yeah,
looks really nasty to me from
yeah.
from an astrological perspective. We have in the second half in October, well, let's see, I think it starts in August, but we have Venus will turn retrograde in the sign of Scorpio. And typically Venus retrograde cycles are very generally, not always, but they're generally very weak for the US equity markets. And so that combined with a bunch of other things going on towards the end of the year, there's some eclipses that are also very intense looking for the financial markets. And that all kind of starts around August. And if we take a look here,
Yeah, I
this
remember.
peaked in October in 2018, or so I guess September was our first full green week up. So starting in August is when I get a little cautious on the equities. And then, yeah, this is certainly on watch. Then
Okay.
I do think we have some volatility coming up early in the year, but maybe not before we get another move up in early January.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Sorry I interrupted you, but
Oh no, that's great.
it just brought me back. I had a flashback.
Yeah, that's super. I love hearing the collaboration and the narrative that went with that, because that's the interesting thing about using cycles, right? Is that the narrative is often very different.
Yeah.
And interestingly, they don't always repeat in the exact same way. Oftentimes when you're using cycles, you can get an inversion of that cycle.
Yeah.
So it's like the saying, history, it doesn't repeat, but it rhymes, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So if we take a look here just into year end, the green bars that you see here, these are what I call an analog. And I build these based on prior cycles. And this is a 95-year cycle analog, and it has been tracking exceptionally well. We had a couple little deviations, but generally speaking, it's been tracking really well. And it did forecast that we would close the year, generally speaking, up or sideways, maybe potentially sideways to up here as we come to the end of the year. We do have this major monthly ABCD pattern that we just completed on the Dow. I know I've got a lot of lines on here. And we also hit the 1.618 extension from the low of March 2020 to the high of December of 2021. And that's at 48,533. So this major monthly ABCD pattern was completed up very close. We bypassed it just a little bit. So the completion was around 47,000. So if we can turn that into resistance, that's favorable. If not, then this is definitely a very strong resistance zone here that we're working with from a price perspective.
It'd be healthy. It'd be healthy to have a 10-15% correction.
Yeah, it definitely would. It definitely would.
Okay.
But this was the low of our 20-week cycle back here on November 17th. And so because I used Hearst cycles as well as planetary cycles.
Okay.
And so after you get the low of a 20-week cycle, the next 20% roughly of that next cycle is going to be up, because the cycles are measured low to low. And so that puts us roughly in the 20% mark right about now. Let's see. Yeah, we're just about at that 20%, 25% mark. So price behavior here over the next, I'd say, couple weeks is very important. And if we take a look at, all these little tags that I have on my chart, these are cycles that I've measured, and they're planetary cycles. And typically when I measure these cycles, we get a weekly pivot. And a pivot isn't necessarily a trend change, but it's a shift in tone. So for example, here we reached a high and you can see we came down, and then we made a weekly pivot low, right? And then we came back up. So we are in a pivot zone right now, this week, the week of December 15th. And then we have a huge cluster of pivots on the week of December 29th. And this actually hits what Bradley Cowan calls a beast cycle. And I've worked with his book, the Pentagonal Time Cycle Theory book, this year, and it's been a really profound addition to my work. And these pivots, when we run into these, it's basically 666 degrees of measured move of Mars. And when we hit these cycles, we tend to see a pretty strong reaction, at least for a week or two. So the end of the year is looking like a pretty strong reactivity moment
Okay.
on the equities.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Great. That's it. No idea. Well, the B cycle, it could be a melt up or a decline. You
It
don't
could
know.
be. It could be. Yeah. And we'll see. I'm inclined to think we move up into January. And I'm inclined to think that based on we have another event that's happening in January that's a fairly rare event. And Venus will be conjunct Mars and the Sun. And this only happens every 6.5 years. Venus and Mars come into connection with each other more frequently, but we only get the Sun in the combination of a triple conjunction every 6.5 years. And interestingly enough, this little symbol right here is called the part of fortune. And this is a financial astrology symbol that I use quite often in both personal natal charts and on charts of assets. And it's quite literally, it's a calculation. It's not a planet. It's a calculated point. And it quite literally indicates good fortune. And that could be, financial success, but in a person's chart, it could also be, happiness.
Yes.
Just things that bring you good fortune, but when it's positively aspected in an asset chart or in a moment that I'm looking at on the financial markets, I find it to be pretty powerful. And interestingly enough, I went back and looked at all of these events on the Dow Jones back to 1994, and they are just uniformly bullish. They happen inside weekly uptrends. And then there were 2 incidences where they marked a low of consolidation before weekly continuation. And then all the rest of them just happened in the middle of weekly uptrends. And so that is interesting to me. And to me, signals the fact that we may see continuation up into January before we find a high and we see some volatility that I think will kick in.
What date is that in January, that X?
That's on January 7th.
Okay. We could be down into the 7th, and then go off to the races. Just a thought.
Yeah, it could be. It totally could be. That was 2 weeks or 2 of the events. That was the pattern. It was just it was healthy weekly consolidation and then continuation.
Okay. Well, all right. So I mean, if we're selling off and say the S&Ps are back down towards testing that 6,500 level and about to take it out into early January, because that would surprise people, just like so far Santa came early, and I think his sled hit a snowman last Friday. And he may not be back until his sled is repaired, and that could be after New Year's. So if we're going down hard into that time frame, that may be the low for the melt up for 2026.
Yeah, it could be definitely. And I would say based on the structure of my cycle pivots, because the way that I like I guess my system, right, is that when I get back to back pivot structure, do you see how we have this huge cluster here on the week of the 29th?
Yeah.
Then we have another one on the week of the 5th. Then we have another one on the week of the 12th. Then we have another one on the week of the 20th. I'm inclined to think that January is going to present us with some volatility.
Okay.
Typically that's kind of a choppy price behavior right in
Okay.
there.
Okay.
So I would say if we're coming down into that, it could be a buy the dip opportunity, at least for a short-term trade. But also if we're coming up into that, we could be nearing a high around there as well. So I'm
Okay.
open to either situation.
Good to be open. It'll
Yeah.
keep your, I say, keep an open mind. It'll keep your account open.
Yeah. It's definitely.
Because I've been stubborn with narratives before. It's not helpful. Um, so okay, so we have the stock market. Do you have anything on, say, the fortunes of the dollar
I
or
do. Yeah.
uh, okay,
Yeah. So, well, first of all, the cycles on the dollar. And this is something you and I have both been talking about on Twitter, actually. So I've got this ABCD pattern on the daily that completes at 97.70 if we get down there.
okay,
But we're due for a weekly pivot low this week. And as I mentioned earlier, the weeklies always get plus or minus 1 week on either side of them for the time band to produce that low. And this is the forecast I've had in place since November. And as you can see, it has come to fruition.
yeah,
We are in the bottom portion of the target box here.
yeah,
We have a double whenever, if you get more than one cycle hitting at once, it increases the probability that it's going to be a notable low.
okay.
So we have a double cycle hit here for our weekly pivot low that's due this week. So I'm on watch for the low for the dollar.
You're
Um,
the first dollar bear I've talked to all week, a dollar bull, potential dollar I've talked to all week.
I know. I
I
think we're alone in that.
everyone I talk to, sell this rally, sell this rally, and you're right. There could be another shot down. I have two drives. There could be one more drive, but you can't
Yeah.
find a dollar bull anywhere.
Yeah. Well, we're hanging in there. At least
Yeah.
we've got each other.
Yeah, all right. Well, I think it's going to be, what's universally accepted right now is the debasement trade.
Right.
And it's so, has become so popular that I think it's due for an interruption. And the thing that would interrupt it would be people, shorting the dollar and then seeing 102, 103 and saying, I thought the dollar what was supposed to debase.
Well,
Instead, it's going into space.
yeah, well, that's what, my analog also suggests that's this, like, I look for confirmation from multiple angles, right? Like if I want to see all of the confluence line up, and my analog tells us the same thing. I've got a 101 to $102 target as well.
All right,
Um,
cool. All
and
right.
that looks like it should run into to early January is the next set of pivots on the weekly chart that I have, which is the 5th through the 12th.
Okay.
So,
Maybe
um,
we get the stellar rally on a little risk off if we get that. So, see, no one's expecting a sell off. And I made one point, whether it's true or not this year, you should never make an investment decision about whether you should sell because of the calendar and tax implications. Because I'll tell you a story of people that came to me in after the .com bubble popped, and they'd come to me and they go, Dale, I don't know what to do. I go, well, sell. And they go, oh no, I'd have to pay too much in taxes for capital gains. And they went away, and I'm sure they didn't have capital gains. And so be grateful for being able to take a capital gain. How many years have we had learning this trade where we didn't? So never make a market decision. And that's what I think a lot of people are waiting for, the flip of the calendar to sell. And maybe the market sells off and makes them uncomfortable going into it. So anyway, that's just people should take that to heart. Do
I
not make a
agree.
yeah. pay the taxes. Okay. Take the
I,
gain. Go ahead.
you know,
Yeah.
my other career is I work in accounting. So
Okay.
I really, yeah, I like you. If you're paying taxes, you did well. So good work.
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
like pro tax, but I'm also,
Yeah.
just in favor of keeping everything in order. It
Yeah.
just makes sense. So,
So
um,
I think we
yeah.
have time for maybe one other market. Silver's been the superstar. Are we going to 130?
Oh man, I have some fascinating work on silver. I'll tell you what, I actually didn't pull up the astrology charts to show you guys, but there are an astounding number of correlations between the astrology of January and February, March 2026, and the blow off top in 1980 on silver.
Okay. All right.
Astounding. Like
Wow.
I was shocked when I saw it. I was impressed. And so I mean I'm not a ratio specialist, but certainly I've heard the argument that $100 silver would, bring the ratio in balance with gold because there's a 42-to-1
Okay.
traditional ratio.
Yeah, I
Um,
remember those ratios.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think
That's
that
a
that
mean.
I think that's possible. The thing that's got my attention here, though, on silver right now, well, it's two things. So, number one, I had my analog was indicating a peak here in the last 2 weeks, but what happened? Analogs have a can invert mid-cycle, and it's not something that happens that often on most assets, but on silver, it's like silver is the wiliest of them all, and has a tendency to invert. Specifically, it doesn't happen usually just any time during the cycle. It happens either during eclipse season or at the midpoint between eclipse seasons. And we just passed over the midpoint between eclipse seasons last Friday. And so, well, it was a week period, depending on what your calculation is. But last week was that midpoint. And so we did get our deviation from the analog. You can see actually where the deviation happened on the daily. Here's
Yeah.
the daily analog we were tracking perfectly. And
Yeah.
then we got our midpoint of eclipse season, and we just saw continuation.
Yeah.
So I'm inclined to think that the whole analog flipped, and that now we're looking at this blue variation here. It would be healthy from a price perspective for silver to pause here before trying to take out that all-time high, since we're 4 weeks straight up, right?
Yeah.
So we're also printing a TD9, and I never trade on a TD9 alone, but I will tell you some assets really respected, and silver is one of them.
That's a DeMark
Yeah, Tom
indicator.
DeMark 9.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if I get that and it aligns with my pivot harmonics, and so I had a pivot high that I was started looking for last week, and again, those get a 1 week extension. We have another one that strikes next week. So we're in this kind of, when they happen consecutively, it can either end up being choppy consolidation or it can be a rounded top.
Okay.
So either of those things are possible, but
You
overall,
know, that ties in with the dollar, Margo. So if we're
it
we're going to
does.
get a
Yeah,
turn in the dollar,
100%.
gold could rally with a strong dollar, but silver maybe now since it's become a beast. But normally you need a weak dollar for silver to continue.
I absolutely, that's exactly what I've got that I'm keeping an eye on right now. And so I love the idea, and we'll see if it pans out, but I love the idea of some healthy weekly consolidation before continuation and attempt and break of this all-time high next year on silver.
Okay.
Probably with finding a peak in a little bit later in the spring, maybe. I'm thinking maybe March or April. I have some pretty extensive astrology analysis that I'm working on actually on silver for 2026, and I'm going to release it in my Discord here in the next few weeks.
So if you had to make a choice for equities, melt up year or what a lot of the gloom and doomers are saying?
Well, I'd say probably just volatility for equities. That's what but I wouldn't say I'm not a gloom and doomer either. I think that it's a trader's year. So,
okay. Oil's pretty cheap. We're making new lows. I think we're close. Uh,
Yeah, I have an oil, I have an oil chart, an oil analog, and I think we might have a couple more weeks of downside.
okay.
And then we should be looking for a pivot on oil. I didn't pull that chart up, but you know what chart I did pull up that I actually think is that I wanted to show everybody?
Well, I
It's
love TLT. Go ahead. Yeah.
TLT.
Yeah.
And it's TLT actually does have a pattern around the equinoxes with changes of trend. But specifically, my analog indicates that we should be putting in a pivot low. And I know that this is counter to the really
Yeah.
offensive head and shoulders that is
Oh, yeah.
here.
Yeah.
I mean, it really looks like it could just break down. But all of my signals are telling me that this is the weekly pivot low right here. We've got four
Okay.
bullish, these little tags here with the numbers. These are the number of divergences. So we have four bullish divergences on the weekly chart. And then the analog is indicating that we have our pivot low. I have the cycle measurement here, which is 144 degrees of Saturn's movement. And then we also have the winter solstice. And all of those things, you put it together, and I think that we have at least a short-term, move up in TLT that's
Okay.
set to happen.
All right. Margo Amala, everybody. So, Margo, I know you put out a weekly letter. What's the best way for people that may be seeing you for the first time here to get in touch with you and follow your excellent astro work?
Yeah, thank you. So I have a Discord and you can sign up straight through the Discord, or I have a Patreon that you can connect to Discord through. So it just depends on the platform that you prefer to use. And both of those links are in my Twitter profile. So if you just go to my Twitter profile and click on the link tree, it'll take you there. I also have a website, margoamala.com, and people can book individual sessions with me there as well. And then there's links also to my Discord on my website.
Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you, Margo Amala.
Yes, happy holidays, Dale. Thank
All
you so
right.
much. It's
Uh,
always so fun to be with you.
all right. I think we came up with a few decent ideas for anyone who's watching.
Agreed.
All right,
All right.
Margo. All right, follow Margo at Margo Amala on X and check it out. Learn about the planets. You'd really be amazed. Okay, it's amazing to me still. So everyone have a great week. Remember, don't just count your oppositions, count your blessings, and we'll be talking to you later. Take it easy, Margo.
Bye, Dale.
All right. Adios, everybody. This will
Bye,
be on
everybody.
YouTube.